But in the course of remembering this, I also was thinking about someone else, and this also involves bullies. But the guy in this was not a villain. The headmistress of that school was a vile woman. She ruled through terror. She liked to yell and scream and intimidate. Really, she was a much older and female version of and I can tell you that even my grandfather, who almost never said an unkind word about anybody, even he disliked her, if that gives you some sense of perspective on who she was, and I believe is. I don't think she's dead yet, although she's getting to be the age now where she could drop at any moment. But I remember once, we all sort of took, it was pretty common in that school that everyone took a typing class. And the typewriters were manual typewriters that had been there for years. So they jammed and didn't necessarily work that well and required a lot of finger pressure to use them, that sort of thing. But I remember one particular day she was substituting, the principal was substituting in this typing class for the woman who actually was the mother of normally she ran the typing classes. And I don't remember the circumstances of what happened, but you know, my typewriter jammed, or I needed to borrow some whiteout, or I was asking a question about the assignment. I don't know what I was doing, but it involved some measure of talking. And the headmistress walked in and saw this and immediately began excoriating and berating me. And you know, it was humiliating. It was terribly embarrassing, and it was really over absolutely nothing of any importance. But, you know, I was really a delicate flower at that time, rather more so then than now. And, you know, my voice started quivering as I was trying to answer her, sort of the questions associated with her interrogation that was being done quite publicly. And, you know, I kind of started to cry. And after she walked out and closed the door, this guy named Matt, who was also, again, like a year or two ahead of me, he broke the awful and awkward silence, not with something that made fun of me, but he just said out loud to no one in particular, "She is a bitch." And in that moment, it was probably one of the nicest things that you might have ever expected anyone to do. And I know the story is not going to be that impactful for most of you, but to me that was a big deal, because this was someone who, hell, I thought he was cute, and I thought he was very nice, and I saw him as a popular kid, and, you know, I think that he, I sometimes would, I guess when this occurred to me today, I was thinking, you know, he may have been a puppy in the form of a man, because he was, you know, he was curious, and he was kind, and he, you know, he had a sort of exploratory personality that was the flip of everything his brother was not, in terms of being outgoing. You know, his brother Jeff was very quiet, and Matt was very much more extroverted. But in terms of who he actually was as a person, I think that he was the flip of. He was all the good things that was not. But, you know, I remember him with blue eyes. I don't know if he actually had blue eyes or not. I remember him with blue eyes. He had beautiful skin. He had kind of sandy hair. He, you know, sometimes had a mustache, sometimes a little bit of a beard, sometimes a mustache and a little scruff here. You know, he was the sort of person that I would have very much wanted as an older brother to look out for me, because that's really what I wanted at the time. And I guess, you know, as I got older and as I look at the situation now, he's someone that you would have been very pleased to have as a partner or husband. You certainly would have been pleased to have him as a son, or husband, he he had, you know, sort of the country accent. He wore a lot of plaid shirts, and I mean, he and his brother grew up in a farming family, and they still farmed, I think, for the most part. And you know, he was just a good guy, and you know, I remember hearing several years ago, and I never knew him that well, but I remember hearing several years ago that that he had died. I mean, he just been really unexpectedly found dead in his home, and you know, he would have been like in his early 30s or something. And I mean, it wasn't foul play or anything of that nature, but you know, I don't really know why. I don't know if there is an answer. I don't think there's necessarily any rhyme or reason to everything, but I don't really know why people like get to survive and bring torment on people, and then, you know, something happens to someone like Matt. But I wanted to tell that story in concert with the story, because I just felt like it was appropriate to, you know, celebrate heroes, because in a way, Matt was a hero to me that day. And I guess I wanted to say, celebrate your heroes while you have a chance to do it, and preferably while they know that you think they're pretty wonderful, or can tell them that. And also, I would say to you, kick the villains in the balls when you get a chance, because you can't bank on anyone else doing it. There's not necessarily going to be justice unless you enact it. And I know that sounds a lot like vigilantism, but when people do not just live and let others live, when they actively interfere in other people's lives, I really don't have a problem with people taking matters into their own hands in certain ways. Yeah, I think an intervention is not wrong. I'm a big believer in living and letting live. And I'm a big believer in trying to oppose those who don't just live and let live. I can tell you the reason that I liked that moment with so much, or when I got to stomp on his hand. It's because it reminded me of, it was the closest I ever got to getting to be something I've imagined being. I've always thought it would be incredibly awesome to be an apparition and be able to appear and torment bullies or wife beaters, just awful people. It really has to do with stopping the damage that they're doing to others. Unfortunately, the bullies get to tear apart their victims and tear them down in ways that render people who have a lot of potential and often would have been quite beautiful, they often transform them to someone with less potential and someone who is never going to be who they ultimately could have been. And I think that's a travesty. To be an apparition and be able to torment someone sight unseen is very much, it would create the sort of paranoia and fear in bullies that they create in their victims, because the victims really never have any power, usually never have any power, and they really never know from where, and you never know when that abuse is going to come next. And you can do a lot of destruction and tearing down of an awful shell and a beautiful shell with paranoia and fear. And there are those who deserve that, and there are those who don't. And there are some people who deserve to be torn down and need to be rebuilt in a much better way. And so I guess this is just a reminder to say, celebrate your heroes while you have a chance, and preferably so they know. But also it's to say, if you get a chance, kick the villains in the balls, because you can't necessarily count on the universe making things right.